What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be ranking NFL teams again, but this time we're going to be basing it off of how much the draft helped them improve. So if they filled most of their needs, they overall became a better team, they'll be in better, or if they did incredible, they go in much better. Then they get solid picks that maybe help them a little bit, but they might have also lost some players in trades or something. They'll go around the same. And then if they got picks, the people they were aiming for got picked before them. They had to give up a lot of stuff to get players they wanted. Then they're going to go in worse. And then if they just had a terrible draft, they reached a lot, their players got taken that they wanted before them, then they're going to go in a lot worse. So to make sure this is accurate, I have a little cheat sheet over here. Shows me all the players that each team drafted. So before we get started, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and let's get straight into it. Starting off with the Eagles. They needed corners badly. They needed corners really badly. And first two rounds, they got Quinion Mitchell, great corner out of Toledo. They also got Cooper DeJean. In my opinion, two top 5 corners in this draft. So they really got what they needed there. And then if you look at their other needs, they needed a wide receiver. They got Smith in the 5th round. I would say they got better, in my opinion. They needed corners. That was a big problem for them last year. And they got one with, they got two actually, Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell. So I think a great draft for them. All right, next up we got the Packers. And over here we can see they got Jordan. They needed tackles and corners and safeties, and a linebacker as well. And here is what they got. They got Jordan Morgan, 1st round, pick number 25. But a lot of people were thinking about this one as a reach. Even Packers fans said it was a reach themselves. But I honestly don't think it's as bad as they were making it. It might have been a bit of a reach, but I don't think it was terrible. Then they also got Edgerrin Cooper, a great linebacker, 2nd round, pick 13. I think they're going to stay around the same. It wasn't a bad draft per se for them, but it wasn't anything insane. You know, they just got a tackle, a linebacker. They got a safety also in the 2nd round, which is nice. He's from Georgia. He might turn out to be okay. It just wasn't anything crazy. A steal I think they might have gotten here. If you look, they needed they needed a corner. In the 7th round, they got Kalen King from Penn State. I think that could be a steal there. He might be starting material in my opinion. So just keep an eye on him. Next up, we got Baltimore, and honestly, it wasn't a bad draft for them. They got Nate Wiggins at 30, which I think was a kind of a steal, and they did need a corner. A lot of teams needed corners. But besides that, it wasn't anything insane. I mean, they got Disa Isaac, Roger Rosengarten. It wasn't bad, but I'm gonna put them in worse. I think they're really close to around the same, but I think they're gonna go in worse. Next up, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I think had one of the worser, oh my gosh, what am I saying? One of the worst drafts this year, in my opinion. They need a center and a wide receiver, and they got a center 1st round, Graham Barton. I think he's a good center, but they didn't get a wide receiver till the 3rd round, so I don't think it was an incredible draft for them. I'm gonna put them in worse. I don't think they're quite a lot worse, but it just wasn't their draft in my opinion. All right, next up we have the Commanders. I know this is a Redskins logo. I didn't make the tier list. I just picked this one. It turns out they're a little outdated, but they had the big pick at pick number 2. They got Jaden Daniels from LSU, 2nd best quarterback in the draft, according to ESPN. I think they got better for sure, maybe even much better. They might be our first much better. I think they gotta be, because they've been trying to find a quarterback for so long, and I'm really high on Jaden Daniels. I think he'll be great, definitely a starter at least. I think he could be their franchise QB. All right, next up we got the Texans, who did not have a 1st round pick. They had 2 2nd round picks though. The reason they didn't, because they had to give up a lot to acquire the great players they have on their team now, like Stephon Diggs and a couple other great players they got. So they didn't have a 1st round, 2 2nd round picks. In the 2nd round, they got Kamari Lassiter, corner for Georgia, and Blake Fisher, tackle for Notre Dame. They needed a corner. They did not really need a tackle. It was an incredible draft. They needed a tight end, and they got Cade Stover, who could definitely be a starter for them, in my opinion. I'm going to put them around the same. You know, they didn't have a 1st round pick, so that definitely hurts them. But I don't think it's going to affect their team too much. All right, next up we got the Dallas Cowboys, and according to ESPN, it says their number one need was a wide receiver, and they didn't get a wide receiver till the 40th pick in the 6th round. So that's a little questionable there. They got Ryan Flournoy out of Southeast Missouri State. They needed one badly. Maybe they just weren't falling for them, honestly. They didn't want to reach for anything. But it just was not a great draft for them. They got Tyler Guyen, who's a good tackle at number 29. I think that was a solid pick for them. But besides that, they just didn't make any splashes. I'm going to put them in worse. We still have not had one in a lot worse. All right, next up we got the Jets, and I think at pick number 11 they might have got a bit of a steal. A lot of people were sleeping on Olu Fashanu from Penn State. I'm a Penn State fan. I watched this guy for the last 4 years. He knows what he's doing. He's a great player. He only had a couple injuries which made people question him, but the Jets saw the talent in him and they took him at 11, which I think was a great pick for them. They needed a tackle as well, and I think this is the best tackle they could have gotten. They also needed a receiver for their number 2 need. They didn't have a second round pick, but first pick in the 3rd round, Malachi Corley, Western Kentucky. Not a bad pick. But besides that, they didn't have anything else crazy. I do think they're going to get better from this because O-line definitely is going to improve a lot with a leader like Olu Fashanu on the line. And, it just was a solid draft for them. They got some pieces they needed. All right, next up we have the Raiders. And a lot of people were questioning at pick number 13. They picked Brock Bowers, who, don't get me wrong, I think is the best tight end in the draft. And one of the best tight ends we've had in a very long time in the draft, in my opinion, at least. Here's the thing, though. Their number 1 need was a quarterback. And in all 7 rounds, they did not get a single one. They had 8 picks, I believe. 9 picks, actually. And they did not get a single quarterback. Now, this probably just means they're waiting for one to open up later this season or make a trade for something. I'm going to put them in a lot worse. Just for now, maybe they're planning something to get a quarterback, but just because they didn't get that, and a couple other things too, they didn't get an offensive guard, which is another big need of theirs. They did get a running back, which they really needed, but they got him in the 6th round. So I just don't think it was a great draft for them. I think they're the first team in a lot worse. All right, next up we have the Panthers, and they had the last pick in the 1st round. That's not because they won the Super Bowl. It's because they got traded to that position. A lot of trading was being done in that area of the draft. And for that pick, they picked Xavier Legette, wide receiver for South Carolina. And, I'm not going to go as far to say it's a reach. I don't think it's the best pick they could have made. They needed a wide receiver pretty badly. But maybe it was, actually. I don't know their wide receiver situation too much. But they just didn't get a lot of their needs. They needed an edge and a center. They didn't get either of those in the draft. They got a corner and a running back, which they needed. 2nd round, they got Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, the running back. I think that is a good pick, personally. And then they also got a cornerback in the 5th round, which they really needed. But a 5th round quarterback, he probably won't make the starting team. It wasn't a great pick. I'm going to put them in worse. Before I go on, I want to say everything that I say in this video is my opinion. If you want to go leave your own opinions in the comments, it's cool. Just do it respectfully. And yeah, let's move on with the video. We have the Falcons, and oh man, it was not a good draft for them, I'll be honest. They got a quarterback right after they signed Matt Ryan to 180 something million dollar deal. Was not a great draft for them. I'm gonna put them in a lot worse. I think Michael Penix is a good player, but they do not need a quarterback. And I think they definitely could have got someone better with that pick. Like a really good edge, even maybe someone like a cornerback. The cornerback was their number 1 need, and they did not get a single one. It was a bad draft for them. They got 3 of their 5 main needs. They got an edge, a defensive tackle, and a linebacker. But it could have been better for them. Not a great draft. All right, next up we have the Chargers, and I think it was a great draft for them personally. Joe Alt was their 1st round pick at pick number 5. They really needed an offensive tackle, and then they also needed a wide receiver. And they got Ladd McConkey from Georgia. I think also a great pick. The only one of their needs that they didn't get was a tight end, which you can find those in free agencies, and they aren't quite as important as positions like wide receiver or corner, in my opinion. But for the most part, I think they had a good draft. I'm gonna put them in better. And just saying right now, the order of these teams in their category does not mean that I think the Cowboys had a better draft than the Panthers or so on and so forth. I think they're just whatever. They are not ordered. They're just in any order. All right, next up we have the Dolphins, and they got Chop Robinson from Penn State, the edge, with their first round pick. Um, they only hit on 2 of their 5 main needs, and the first 2 main needs they did not get a single player for. They didn't get a defensive tackle or a tight end, and they also didn't get a guard. They did get an offensive tackle and an edge. So I don't think this was quite a great draft for them. I'm going to put them in worse. There might be a lot of teams in worse, to be honest. All right, next up we have the Cleveland Browns, and they only hit on 2 of their 5 needs, but the 2 needs they did hit on were their 2 most important, being defensive tackle and linebacker. They did not have a first-round pick. They didn't have a pick until late in the second round, but they got Michael Hall Jr., defensive tackle for Ohio State. I think they might have got a steal with Zach Zinter in the 3rd round, the guard for Michigan. I think he's one of the better guards in college. I don't think it was a great draft for them, to be honest. I'm going to put them in a lot worse. It was not great. I know they traded away some of their picks, so they didn't have a first round. But I think they got a lot worse from this, to be honest. All right, next up we have the Patriots. Patriots hit on 4 or 5 needs. Now here's the thing. Oh my goodness, I don't know what to think about this. They got Drake May, pick number 3. But remember, a couple of years ago they got Mac Jones around. I think they got him at like pick 20 actually, so a little later on in the draft. But they got a young receiver in the draft, a really similar receiver. I'm saying receiver, quarterback, in my opinion. I think Drake May and Mac Jones are pretty similar, and we know what happened to Mac Jones. He was an absolute bust, and I'm just afraid they're going to do the same thing with Drake May. For that, I'm going to put them in a lot worse. They got Jalen Pork in the 2nd round, a receiver for Washington, which I think was a great pick. Caden Wallace, offensive tackle. They needed a tackle. I just don't think it was a great draft for them. All right, next up we have the Detroit Lions, who I think had a solid draft. It wasn't an amazing draft. It wasn't anything crazy, but they did solid, I think. They didn't get a receiver, which was one of their needs, and they also didn't get an edge. They only had 6 picks, though, where a lot of the other teams had 8 or 9. So, they traded away quite a bit. They got Terrion Arnold, great cornerback, 1st round. Then they got another cornerback, 2nd round, with Anise Rakestraw Jr. from Missouri. And then they got a tackle, which they didn't really need, but I guess you can always use depth on the O-line. And he's out of British Columbia. I'm not sure what that means. That's like a Canadian team or something. But it was a solid draft. I think they're going to stay around the same. I don't think they got much better. I think Terrion Arnold will definitely help them quite a bit in their secondary, but don't think it was anything crazy out of them. All right, next up we have the Tennessee Titans, who it appears on ESPN they hit on all 5 of their needs, which was they're the first team we've seen so far to do that. And they weren't bad picks either. Number 7, they got J.C. Latham, which I think was a good pick. They needed a tackle. They needed a defensive tackle. They got Devondre Sweat out of Texas. They needed a linebacker. They got Cedric Gray, North Carolina. They got everything they really needed this draft, plus a little more. They got a good cornerback out of Louisville. They got a good edge out of Michigan. It was a great draft for them, in my opinion. I don't think they're quite better. I don't think they're quite much better. Maybe they are, actually. I'm going to put them in much better. Titans and Commanders, 2 of the worst teams in the NFL, are in much better, that's crazy, actually. We'll see how that turns out for them in real life. But next up, we're going to have the Giants. And the Giants got a great receiver at number 6. They got Malik Neighbors out of LSU. In my opinion, the 2nd best receiver in the draft this year, behind Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State. Still a great pick, though. They also got a safety, Tyler Newman, Minnesota. Their number 1 need, though, was a quarterback, and they did not get one. They only had 6 picks, but still, I feel like they could have picked up a quarterback somewhere in there, even if it was just a 2nd or 3rd rounder. I think that would have helped them quite a bit, but maybe they're planning something in the offseason to make a big trade or maybe even in free agency. But I don't think it was a terrible draft for them. I'm going to put them in around the same. They got a star of a wide receiver who I think would be great for them. I mean, they got a tight end as well, Theo Johnson for Penn State. Um, it wasn't a bad draft. I don't think they got any worse from it, but I think they are still going to need to figure out that QB situation. Next up, we have the Broncos, who lost Russell Wilson this offseason to the Steelers. So they decided to go QB. That was their number one need, and they picked up Bo Nix. A solid pick, I think. I think he will be decent for them. But once again, Russell Wilson wasn't incredible for them. They went 8-9 last year. I don't know about this draft. They got 4 of their 5 needs. They got a good receiver, Troy Franklin out of Oregon. They got a great edge, Jonah Elise from Utah in the 3rd round. They didn't have a 2nd round pick. I don't think it was terrible. I'm gonna put them in worse though. It just wasn't anything. Actually, let's put them in around the same. I think they did earn an around the same spot just because they got their QB. We'll see how he turns out for them. We'll have to see. They are probably hoping it's not going to turn out around the same as it did for Russell Wilson. But we'll have to see. Maybe he'll be a franchise QB for them and lead them back to what they used to be 10, 15 years ago with Peyton Manning. Not even that long ago, honestly. All right, next up we got the Vikings, who are another team that needed a quarterback, and they got one. They got J.J. McCarthy, the QB for Michigan, who led them to 2 back-to-back, I almost said Super Bowls, national championships. And then they got a second first-round pick, actually, and they got Dallas Turner, an edge for Alabama. But they didn't really need an edge, so that's why I'm a little questioning that. But maybe they wanted some depth or just to have two edges out there at the same time. Because I think they have, I forget his name right now, but they have a great edge on their team. It wasn't a terrible draft for them though. I think they're gonna go around the same. We'll see how JJ McCarthy turns out for them. Maybe he'll be good for them since they lost Kirk Cousins, but we will have to see how that turns out. Oh shoot, I clicked on a notification. All right, next up we have the San Francisco 49ers, who honestly can't get much better. They have an incredible team at the moment, but there have been rumors circulating about trading Debo or Brandon Ayuk to a couple of different teams. I think the Steelers were up there, Cardinals, a couple other teams. Oh my goodness. They got a receiver, Ricky Pearsall, which makes me think they might be trading away. I don't think they're going to trade away Debo. I think there is a chance they trade away Ayuk. I think the Steelers will probably be the best bet there. Ricky Pearsall, though, I think he's a great receiver. I saw some really nice highlights from him, one-handed catches and stuff. So that leads me to think they're going to trade away Brandon Ayuk, but it just wasn't a crazy draft for them. I'm going to put them in around the same. Honestly, they can't get much better because their team is already insane, but I think around the same is a good spot for them. All right, next up we have the Rams. They got Jared Verse, which I think was a good pick from them, out of Florida State, a great edge, but they only hit on 2 of their 5 main needs. They got a defensive tackle, Brandon Fisk, out of Florida State once again, so they got 2 Florida State players, so there's going to be some chemistry there on the defensive line. Both of them play defensive line. I don't think it was a terrible draft for them, honestly. Sure, they only hit on 2 of their 5 needs. I think it was solid. I think maybe they could have done a little better, so I'm going to put them in worse. But I think it was ahead of most of these. I just don't think it was quite with some of these teams up there. All right, next up we have the Seahawks. It wasn't an incredible draft from them. They had Byron Murphy, who I think is a good player, don't get me wrong, out of defensive tackle out of Texas. They didn't have a 2nd round pick, so they got Christian Haynes in the 3rd round out of UConn. He's a guard. And they had 3 6th round picks. They got a guard, a corner, and an offensive tackle. But they didn't get an edge, safety, or center, which was 3 of their big needs they had this year. So I'm going to put them in worse. I don't think it's quite a lot worse, but I think it could have been better for them for sure. All right, next up we have the Bills. Bills did not have a 1st round pick. They had 2 2nd round picks. And with it, they got a receiver, which they definitely needed because they have absolutely no one on their team. They got Keon Coleman, wide receiver out of Florida State. I think that was a good pick from them. Honestly, I think he should have gone 1st round. So I think that was a steal in my opinion. But They hit on all 5 of their needs actually. But most of the ones they hit on, sorry, I was gonna say in round 5, 6, or 7, most of their needs were hit. So I don't think it was a great draft. I'm gonna put them in a lot worse actually. And next up we have the Jaguars. Next up we have the Jaguars, who I think had a great draft, in my opinion at least. They hit on all 5 of their needs. They got a much needed receiver with Brian Thomas Jr., who was the second best receiver out of LSU. They had a great receiver room in there with Malik Neighbors and Thomas Jr. They got another LSU player second round. They got defensive tackle Mason Smith. A solid draft for them for sure. Another player from LSU. They really like their LSU players. They got Jordan Jefferson. He's a defensive tackle, which they also needed. They got an offensive tackle. They got an edge. It was a great draft from them, in my opinion. And honestly, I think they're going to be our 3rd team in much better. A great draft from the Jags. All right, we have the Bears up next. And they only had 5 picks. They didn't have a single pick in the 2nd round, 6th round, or the 7th round. So, oh my goodness, that's wild. Somehow, though, with only 5 picks, they hit on 4 of their 5 needs. They got QB, number one pick in the draft. They got Caleb Williams, a good pick in my opinion. Then they had another pick in the 1st round. They got Romeo Dunze, a wide receiver out of Washington. Both of those were incredible picks. They had to give up a lot to get them, but I think those were good picks. They didn't have any 2nd rounds. They got a tackle. 4th round, they picked a punter, which is interesting. And then 5th round, they got Austin Booker, edge from Kansas. Honestly, though, that's a much better team right there. Star receiver, star QB, and then some depth on the O-line. A punter, I guess, might help a little bit. And then a good edge as well out of Kansas. A great draft for them for sure. All right, next up we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, my favorite team, so I am a little biased. I will try to keep it as non-biased as I can. I personally think it was a good draft for us. I know the ins and outs of this team. We got most of the things we needed. The only need we didn't get was an offensive tackle, but we did get a guard and a center, so we had 2 offensive players, so we might switch them around. And since we didn't really need a guard, which was our main pick, Troy Fautanu, could probably move him to tackle, which was one of our needs. I think we got pretty much all we need. I think Omar Khan did a great job here. Troy Fautanu, 1st round pick, good player right there. He'll be great on our O-line, which is not great right now. Then we really needed a center, and we got Zach Frazier out of West Virginia, which from the most part I think people are saying he's pretty good. Michigan, Roman Wilson out of Michigan, a wide receiver. A lot of people said that was a steal. Then, the biggest steal of them all, in my opinion, in the 3rd round, our 2nd pick of the 3rd round, we got Peyton Wilson, the linebacker out of NC State, and he won the award for the best linebacker in the nation. I think he was like the 6th or 7th linebacker picked in the draft, so that's really strange. But I think we had some steals in there. Just to keep it non-biased, I'm going to put us in better instead of much better. I think it was a great draft for us. All right, next up we have the Bengals, who had 10 picks in the draft. They hit on 4 of their 5 needs. They didn't get a running back, which they kind of needed, but they still have Joe Mixon, so I think they'll be okay. Main pick they got 1st round, Amarius Mims, offensive tackle from Georgia. He's definitely a good player for them. I think he'll help their O-line quite a bit. They got a good defensive tackle out of Michigan. They got a good receiver. Their main need was receiver. I know they have Jamar Chase, but they probably want some they probably want some depth because actually 3 days ago, after the draft happened, Tyler Boyd agreed to a contract with the Titans. So they lost him there. And Jermaine Burton will definitely help. He's from Alabama. I think it was a good draft, but I'm going to put them in around the same. All right, next up we have the Kansas City Chiefs, who, honestly, there's not much room for growth for them. They have their team pretty much secured. They won the last 2 Super Bowls. They're very good at the moment. But one of their big weak spots this year, even last year as well, they didn't have many wide receivers. And this year, I think they got a steal. They got Xavier Worthy in the 1st round and number 28. I predicted when I did my mock draft, I think I had him in the top 15. I had him up there with Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors. but he fell quite a bit, mainly because of injuries. So a lot of teams were really questioning him. I think that was a great pick, but besides that, they didn't have anything crazy in this draft. I mean, they got a good tackle out of BYU, but just nothing crazy for them. I think they're gonna be around the same. Once again, they don't have much room for growth. But actually, let's put them in better, because the one big thing they needed this year was a good receiver, and I think they got that at Xavier Worthy. All right, we are almost at the end. We have Marvin Harrison Jr., who was the main pick for the Arizona Cardinals at pick number 4. I think it was a solid pick for them. Out of Ohio State, definitely the best receiver in the draft. They had a second first round pick, Darius Robinson out of Missouri, an edge. Great pick for them. I think it was a solid draft. I think I'm gonna put them in better, just because Marvin Harrison's definitely gonna help them out a lot. They needed a receiver badly, and they got a great one, the best one actually this year. So we have two more teams, the Colts and the Saints. Let's get straight to it. All right, this has been a longer video, but we're almost at the end, so bear with me for a little longer. Liatu Latu, edge out of UCLA, was their first round pick. They kind of needed an edge. It was their 5th most important need. Then I think they got a steal at wide receiver. They got Adonai Mitchell in the second round. They didn't get a tight end, which was their number 1 most needed spot. I don't think it was a great job for them. I'm going to put them in worse. And finally, we have the Saints. Who hit on 4 of their 5 needs. The only one they didn't get was guard, but they did get an offensive tackle. Was their most important need. They got Talise Fuaga, who I haven't heard of before the draft, but he's out of Oregon State. Then they also got Kool-Aid McKinstry, early second round out of Alabama. I think that was a great pick. Spencer Rattler, they got a QB. Okay, I'm not sure he's the greatest of QBs, but we'll have to see. They got a receiver out of Pitt. I think it was an okay draft. I'm going to put them in around the same. It wasn't anything crazy. But that's going to be it. If you guys did enjoy this video, be sure to subscribe, like the video, comment your opinions on it. Just be respectful to everyone in the comments below. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out. God bless.